Hello, saver. Whether you're saving for that trip to the tropics or saving for an emergency, now is the time to take advantage of Wells Fargo's savings options. Wells Fargo offers savings accounts that can help you save towards your goals. So, what are you saving for? Visit a Wells Fargo branch or wellsfargo.com/save to open a savings account today.
Wells Fargo Bank, N.A., member FDIC.
Ooh, a spicy question. I
because
love
the
it.
writing is sort of everything, right? Like you can fix plot holes, but if the writing isn't
so some
there,
readers love that, and some readers are like, "But I wanted more of this." So it's kind of a gamble.
Hello, and welcome back to the Right and Wrong podcast. On today's episode, I am joined by a best-selling thriller author from all the way across the ocean in Florida, somewhere between Disney and the swamp. It's Dea Poirier. Hi, welcome to the show.
Thank you. So excited to be here.
Thanks for coming on. Always great to start with your latest works, which is Have You Seen Her, which will be coming out September 19th. Tell us a little bit about it.
So it's a complicated story, but at its core, it's really about an incredibly toxic sisterhood between two women who could not be any more different. Our main character, Blair, is a social worker who has a very mundane existence and has been estranged from her sister for years. And then she gets a call that her sister, who's one of the biggest influencers in the world, rich, famous, amazing person, has disappeared. And her brother-in-law wants her to come to Florida to try to help find where her sister has gone.
Okay, great setup. I love how you just open it with, at its core, it's about a toxic relationship. I mean, that's always interesting to me, at least.
Well, I've written a few books that had, a sibling dynamic, and they've always been rather good sibling dynamics. And so I wanted to do something different this time. And I was like, what if I just made them not really like each other at all?
What's the opposite of loving?
Yes, exactly.
Is that something you like to do with your writing in general? You sort of it's like, oh, I've done that a few times. Let's do something completely different here.
Yeah, I feel like otherwise it just gets a little stale and you're like, are my readers going to think I'm just telling the same story again? And so I really wanted to do another sibling book, but I'm like, oh, I don't want this to be too similar to my others. So let's just try to do something completely different.
Yeah. Did you have, having written a couple of healthy sibling relationships, was it fun to then write a sort of destructive one?
Yeah, honestly, it adds way more drama to the story to be able to just be like, oh man, let's not make anything good in this relationship. Let's have a terrible backstory. Let's make them not like each other at all and just be completely opposite personalities.
That's so funny. Is this, it sounds like you went into this with quite a lot of ideas about how it was going to play out. Are you someone that plans these books? Do you have everything kind of lined up before you start writing it?
Yeah. So, I have I guess neurodivergent is the term. I have aphantasia, so I cannot picture things in my mind, and it's difficult for me to structure things in my head. So I am a very, very detailed plotter because I find it much easier to write my books that way. So ahead of time, I write out my full outline, my outline for each chapter, my character arcs, descriptions I'm going to use because I can't picture these characters. I have no clue what they look like. I hope my readers do. And so I make myself these little cheat sheets so that writing the book is easier for me. And so, yeah, I would say before I actually start really writing a story, I probably spend a full week or more planning out all of these elements so that I don't get stuck during my drafting period being like, oh no, I don't have any idea what kind of house they live in.
Right. Oh, okay. So when you come to write it, it's actually quite a smooth process because you've got it all kind of mapped out and you know where everything kind of fits within the puzzle.
Yes.
Okay. Do you? A friend of mine is an avid planner also, and she all of her chapters are approximately the same length, and she knows exactly within those chapters, like to the sort of 100 word ish, where certain moments are going to happen. Is that kind of how granular you get with it?
Oh no, I wish I could. Oh, definitely not. I mean, mine, I would say my chapters really vary in length, and I don't plan how long they're going to be. I normally just plan the core elements. So if there's a specific conversation I need to happen, if there's evidence or red herring that needs to appear, if there's a big conflict moment that needs to be present. And then I like to end a lot of my chapters on like little cliffhangers. So also like I will call out like, this is the cliffhanger you're going to use at the end.
Yeah, because I think that the sort of baseline planning thing is you're sort of roughly just knowing with each chapter, it's like, okay, these are the elements that need to go into the chapter. And that's the kind of most simple kind of chapter planning you can do. Yeah. So I'd love to talk a bit more about the aphantasia. It's so interesting to me because it's one of those things that it's very hard for me to fathom, like to think about how that works. You know, I'm sure like a lot of people, when I'm reading something or when I'm writing something, I am picturing it like a sort of movie scene or like me experiencing it in my head. For you, what I mean, let's start with like you talked about it a little bit, but what kind of is the definition of aphantasia? Like, what does it mean?
So the traditional definition of aphantasia is that you have no mental imagery, but there's actually a scale of like how extreme your aphantasia can be. So you can have very little imagery in your head, or you can have none. And I have none. So I actually didn't realize this until probably like 6 or 7 years ago. I always thought it was, you know, like when people told you to imagine something, I didn't think you were actually imagining something. Like because my head doesn't do that. So I thought it was just like figurative. I guess like that's the difficult thing is like you don't really understand that your brain functions differently than anybody else's because you've never been in anybody else's head. So when I realized that everybody else really, or not everybody else, but a lot of other people have mental imagery, I was like, wait, what? That's not fair. Why do you get that?
That's so interesting. Is it strange? Yeah, I mean, obviously you've just said like it's strange for you to like if you watch a film and you're like, God, is this what people are like picturing? Like this is kind of vaguely going on in people's heads while they're reading.
Yeah, I mean, I'm one of the rare people, I guess. I absolutely love the book into movie genre. Like I love when people make a movie out of a book because I had no idea what these characters looked like unless I was reading a graphic novel. Yeah. So to be able to like see it on the screen, like, oh my God, like this is what the author meant. Like this is what these people looked like. That's phenomenal.
That's so cool. You must enjoy because a lot of the issue that people have when it's like, oh, we've adapted this into a movie is like, oh, well, I pictured them differently. You know what I mean? That's such a big issue. So that's just not a problem for you.
No. Not at all. Yeah.
I feel like there's a little bit of just thinking, this is me personally, is like sometimes I'll get so excited about a scene because I've pictured this incredible cinematic moment in my head. And I'll get so attached to that it'll be sort of almost ham-fisted while I'm writing. I feel like in some ways there's a benefit to you where it's like you're not picturing these things in these kind of movie moment cinematics, which means that you can be much more logical, I think, about how you approach the story in your writing.
Yeah, I think I'm able to kind of distance myself from it a little bit in a way. So I'm not very in my head about it. And the other thing is like I don't daydream. So I don't get distracted. So when I sit down,
that's like a superpower.
So like when I sit down to like write my scene or write my book, I literally can just think about that. Like my brain doesn't drift to other things or to imagining it. I can just, it's like I have words in my head and I'm just putting them out.
That's brilliant, like laser focus. And how does it affect you as a reader? As in, like, are you drawn to certain genres because of the sort of forms and traditions of those styles?
Yes, I would say one, I prefer audiobooks. It's really hard for me to sit down and read physical books. I've always had issues with that. I had a really hard time reading as a kid.
Yeah.
So I absolutely love audiobooks, and I find it so difficult to read like high fantasy or super hard sci-fi, because I'm just like, I have no idea what you're talking about at this point.
Yeah.
Like when it's like so descriptive and so outside of anything I've experienced, it's like my brain has no reference point. So my brain is just like, we're disregarding all of this because we don't know what any of it means.
Yeah, because especially with fantasy, and I've seen all the like memes and stuff when it's like when you pick up a fantasy novel and it's like you can't pronounce half the names or half the words. So the author is just asking you to be like, make something up.
Yeah.
Imagine something, whatever you want.
And my brain's like, nope, we don't do that.
Sorry, can't do that. Have you watched sort of like book adaptations of fantasy into film and then looked at them and sort of thought, oh, that's what they wanted?
Yes. So I really do enjoy fantasy TV shows and movies, and same with sci-fi. I love sci-fi movies. And like I tried to read, what was it? It was Dragon Riders of Pern. And I liked the idea of it, but so much of it was like, I have no idea what this is. And I can't remember if they actually made a movie out of that one, but I'd seen some other similar dragon movies, and I was like, I wonder if this is what they meant. So,
they have How to Train Your Dragon.
Yeah, I've seen the How to Train Your Dragon, and then I guess like the Game of Thrones ones might be similar because they've got a bunch of dragons. But
yeah. That's so interesting.
Yeah, there's definitely been ones I wish that they had an adaptation, because I was like, my brain isn't going to fill in any of these blanks, so I'm not going to be able to read this at all.
Yeah. So what genres are you drawn to then? I understand, obviously, anything that's sort of otherworldly and highly descriptive, like fantasy and sci-fi. What's the kind of stuff that you like to read or listen to on audiobook?
I listen to a lot of mystery and thrillers. I really like those. I also listen to a lot of middle grade and YA with my son in the car. And those are usually like, he likes the ones that are kind of fantasy. The like Percy Jackson books, he's a huge fan of those. So we've listened to all of those books. But in general, I absolutely love thrillers and mysteries because I feel like they're the easiest for my brain. Dark romance is also great because I don't have trouble with that at all. But I wish I could do more fantasy. I really do.
Well, don't worry, because there's a Percy Jackson television series coming out soon, so you'll be able to watch it all, and then you can catch up with what your son's listening to.
Yeah.
Okay, let's get back onto you and your writing and things like that. This is your 8th novel?
Correct. Yeah.
That's a pretty impressive turnout. 2 novels a year. Is that your kind of schedule? That's where you're at now?
I usually write 2 to 3 a year. That doesn't mean I get to publish 2 to 3 a year, but I do write a lot because I just need to keep my brain busy. So I do tend to write 2 to 3 a year. Right now I'm publishing on a schedule of like 2 to 2 a year. I would like to be able to do 3 a year, but haven't gotten there yet. But
Fargo, the new virtual assistant from Wells Fargo, makes banking faster and easier. Like this.
Fargo, what's my checking account routing number?
And this.
Fargo, turn off my debit card.
And this.
Fargo, what did I spend on groceries last month?
And that's just the beginning. Do you, Fargo? You can. In the Wells Fargo mobile app. Learn more at wellsfargo.com/getfargo.
Terms and conditions apply. Your mobile carrier's availability and message and data rates may apply. Wells Fargo Bank, N.A., member FDIC.
Yeah.
In terms of publishing as well, your new book is you're publishing with Bookouture, and you signed with them a couple of years ago. But your original books were not with Bookouture. Were they with Amazon Publishing?
Yes, they were with Thomas and Mercer through Amazon Publishing, and then I also have one book through Polis.
Okay. And are you only publishing with Bookager now, or are these kind of like concurrent things that you're working on?
Right now, I'm just working with Bookouture. I do have some other books on sub, but they're in a different genre. And because I am trying to write some fantasy.
Okay. After what you just told me, that sounds very brave.
Yeah. I mean, they're historical fantasy. So I feel like it's a little bit easier. But yeah, so I like my book After You Died, it is a supernatural thriller. So it definitely has a lot of my thriller elements, but it also has like a supernatural bent to it.
Okay, that makes more sense. So when you say historical fantasy, are you talking sort of like myths and legends and stuff, but still set on Earth?
Not so much myths and legends. I would say they're usually more paranormal or supernatural. So in a historical setting with a historical element behind it. And then, I'll just tell you. So the one I just finished is it's about the body snatching period in Baltimore in the 1800s when people would dig up bodies for the medical school and sell them. And that's like the basis of the story with a very magical element woven in.
Oh, very cool. That's a great pitch. I love it. I'd like to read it. When can I get it?
Hopefully soon.
Awesome. Yeah, so going back to your 8 books, I was interested to see, I was going through your books, and within your books, you do tend to write sequences. So you have the Calderwood cases, which is, was it 2 or 3 books with that? Yeah, the Afterlife, 2 books. And then 3 Detective Harlow Durant books.
Yep.
But the new one is standalone. No
Correct.
plans to make a sequel for that?
No, I don't mind writing series, but they don't sell as well as standalones.
Okay.
So, and I also like the tidiness of like wrapping it up in one story and then being able to move on. Trying to like carry a story arc over 3 books. And Harlow Durant is actually meant to have a 4th that isn't completed yet. But trying to like do that character arc over 4 books and knowing like, okay, I have to sprinkle these little elements into book 1 and 2 and 3 to finally wrap this up in 4.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's just nice to be able to bundle it all into one book and be like, done. Now I can move on to something else.
Yeah, I know what you mean. Because you're not just, as a writer, you're not just sort of like having to not necessarily draw things out, but you are having to pace yourself quite a lot. You're also asking the reader to then pace themselves as well. For the kind of denouement that they're eventually going to get when this character completes their arc. But I mean, the trilogies and duologies and things like that, the best ones are always like planned in advance. Like you need to know, like you say, how slowly you're going to pace where that character goes, what the storyline goes, and things like that. Let's talk about thrillers. Thrillers, just within publishing at the moment, very, very, very popular genre. And in turn, that then means that lots of people are writing for the space, which makes it harder to break into. So a lot of people listening are writing. They're somewhere along the writing journey, maybe looking to sign with their first publisher or agent. What advice would you, as someone who's been in writing thrillers for a while, you've written a lot of books at this point which have been published, what advice would you give to up-and-coming thriller writers who are looking to make their debut stand out from the sort of the rest of the pack?
It's such a tough question because everybody's journey is so different and everybody's book is so different. And there's no like universal advice. Because everybody is going to find their own path. Just like everybody has their own way to write a book. The only thing I can really say that I think really matters and that really resonates is writing a story that is in some way very personal. So, for example, I started my writing journey writing YA, and it wasn't really working. I got an agent off of it, but it wasn't selling. And my agent at the time recommended maybe you should try writing, suspense or mystery for adults, because I think your writing would really lend itself to that. And you tend to go very dark for YA. And I was like, okay, sure. So I tried. And the book I wrote around the time that my grandmother passed away. And at the core of that book, it is about, a sister her sister died and the killer was never caught. But at the core of that book, it's about grief and loss. And I think that it resonated so well because I was going through so much loss at the time that I was able to really thread in everything that I was feeling into that book. And in every single one of my books, they're not about me, but there are elements that are deeply personal. And like my book that I'm working on right now, I would say is my most personal to date. It is about aphantasia. The main character also has aphantasia and a brain that works very similarly to mine. And I would say it's one of the scariest things I've ever written, because trying to explain to the world how your brain works to people whose brains who don't work that way, I'm having to try to reconcile those two things and make them make sense to somebody.
Yeah.
But at its core, I feel like it's a necessary story to tell. That's the thing that I've gotten asked with every single book I've written is, well, what about this is personal to you? What about this resonates with you most? And I think that telling this story is the most personal and the most resonating thing I can write. And so I would say in any of your writing on your path to publishing, look at that and say, what about this is personal to me? How can I add something that feels more real to this?
Well, I think that's a wonderful answer. No, that's brilliant. And it's so true, because even, going further than that, it needs to be personal to you, because otherwise you risk sort of just regurgitating a collection of who are probably your favorite authors, if you know what I mean. Subconsciously, you're going to start emulating people that you like the writing of. It's I guess one of the hardest things about being an author is writing sort of authentically and not mimicking other people's styles. They'll always be there because we are the sum of our experiences. But yeah, I think that's really good advice. And interesting that you said you were originally writing YA. You got an agent writing YA. Do you think the YA protagonists are usually sort of 15 to 18? Do you think that was part of the disconnect? Was the age gap between you as the author and the protagonist that you were writing? Do you think it's sort of an additional hurdle?
I don't know if it was so much that, because I have been told, my first two books, I got told a lot that the voice felt very YA, even though it was an adult book. So I don't know if that's it, but I think that the disconnect is that I do write very, very dark books. I don't know. That's just where my brain always goes, is what's the worst case scenario? And let's write a book about that. So, not only am I picking a very dark setting, the characters are usually very emotionally damaged in some way, and working through some really tough things. So while I know that YA now tends to have a lot of those darker topics, back then, I mean, we're talking over 10 years ago at this point.
Oh, okay. Right.
It was not really focused on a lot of those darker things. And I think at my core, I didn't read a whole lot of books that blended kind of thriller and mystery elements with the supernatural outside of YA. I saw that all the time in YA. So I felt oh, that's what I need to write, because I don't see very many adult thrillers with these things. So yeah, okay, I'll write that. And then I kind of got away from writing the supernatural a bit and then transitioned to more of the adult books, but I still love the YA. Because I was thinking as you were saying that YA has gotten very dark over the past. I mean, just in the last like 3 or 4 years, there's been a huge kind of rise in very dark, murdery YA. I mean, especially in the UK. Maybe it's time to get back into YA. Yeah,
it's ready for you now. It's ready for your darkness. Amazing. Well, that's really, really good advice on a sort of, with the preface of there is no universal advice, which I think is also true. You just got to figure it out and just do your best. Listen to everything, and then see what works for you.
Exactly.
And that brings us on to the final question, the incredibly unfair and difficult question of, Dee, if you were stranded on a desert island with a single book, which book would you like it to be?
Okay. I was going to cheat and like try to sneak in 2.
Okay, well, lots of people do, so you'd be amongst good company.
I will go with my all-time favorite book, which I've probably read over 10 times at this point, which is Diary by Chuck Palahniuk.
Is that Chuck Palahniuk who wrote Fight Club?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
So it's funny, like the first book I ever read from him was Diary, and then later read Fight Club and all of his others. But Diary, to me, is just the most brilliant, amazing book. It surprised me in a way that no book has ever surprised me before. And anybody who's listened to me on any podcast will be bored with this answer because it's always an answer. Because I love it. And everyone, I'm like, you need to read this. Not Fight Club. Fight Club's a great movie. The book, but
I've heard that. Yeah.
Yeah. But Diary is just, it's phenomenal. It's phenomenal.
Oh, okay.
And then my runner-up would be A Darker Shade of Magic by V.E. Schwab. That is one of the only fantasies that, I mean, it's so based, like, sort of in this world that's, like, my brain can wrap around it in a way that's not confusing. So I love the writing. I love that book. So those are my sneaky 2.
Are you hoping for a movie adaptation?
I believe it's in the works.
Is it? Well, I hear that about a lot of books, and then you check in 5 years later, and it's still in the works.
I know that one. I would be there like opening night,
day one.
I would be so excited, so excited.
Amazing, awesome answers. I've not had either. I don't think neither of those books have been picked before, so that's always fun to get new and original ones. Well, thank you so much, Dee, for coming on the podcast and telling us all about your writing and aphantasia and everything that's going on with you. It's been really, really fun and really interesting chatting with you.
Of course. Thank you for having me on.
And for anyone who wants to keep up with what Dee is doing, you can follow her on Twitter at Dea Poirier Books or on Instagram at Dea Poirier. She's also on Facebook. Just search her, you'll find her. And to make sure you don't miss an episode of this podcast, follow along on Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, and Facebook. You can support the show on Patreon, and for more bookish chat, check out my other podcasts, The Chosen Ones and Other Tropes. Thanks again, Dee, and thanks to everyone listening. We'll catch you on the next episode.